Economist. Of course, we're getting into the afternoon. So good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. What have I been reporting on for well over a year now? Mill curtailments. They have been tightening up inventory to try and keep the supply limited in lumber. And when I mean they, I'm talking about the mills out there, not the mom and pop mills, but I'm talking the big production mills. Interfor, Canfor, West Fraser. Here in Oregon, we got Frank's. There is a lot of big time mills out there, but Interfor is huge. They're like in the top 3, if I remember right. And I believe there was a moment in which that they had more mills operating inside of the United States than they did in Canada. Like, this is a Canadian company. And now Interfor has just announced that they are going to be shutting down 2 of the mills down in the southern part of the United States. Now, this is after already shutting down a mill here in Oregon, in Plymouth, I believe, is where they shut that one down. And all of this has been well predicted on this channel months and months and months ago. Now, I have said it for a long time. Lumber at 500 per thousand, or even remotely close to it, is not a profitable position for the mills to operate in. And since that is not a profitable position for them to operate in, they are only going to produce what is absolutely needed by the market. The highest demand lumber. 2x4, 2x6, stud length, and plate stock. Now, if you're not familiar with that, 2x6 are generally used as the exterior walls on a residential home. 2x4s are generally the interior walls. These are the most common sizes for lumber when it comes to new construction of residential homes. 2x4s, 2x6s. The plate stock are the longer boards, the 12-footers, 16-footers, 20-footers. This is what they use for the top and bottom plates. By far, the highest demand portion of the entire lumber market is in 2x4s and 2x6s. So when you're hearing about the lumber futures market, they have narrowed it down to the 2x4 random length green Doug fir. This is where the futures market is looking at as far as where prices are found. There is a huge market out there. There's all kinds of sizes, there's all kinds of lengths, there's all kinds of distribution networks, there's all kinds of prices. But when you're looking at the futures market, they are narrowing it down to one particular item that is delivered from the Pacific Northwest area out to Chicago. Now, what's taken place throughout the rest of the mills could be a different story than what you are seeing within the futures market, but the futures market gives you the best case for understanding what is happening in the broader market. And for months now, we have been reporting on this channel about the mill curtailments. Every single week, I'm finding where another mill is announcing yet another curtailment or an extension of the curtailments. They've been announcing tightening up the inventory. They have been saying it, and that the demand is not picking up. They cannot find the demand that would then drive the prices to the point that they would want to produce in a massive scale. We're not seeing that take place. So the longer the time went on, the tighter the inventory is getting, and we are now experiencing that. Like, I work at a retail position within the lumber industry. Like, I sell 2x4s at a counter, and then I go and I load them up in the back of somebody's truck. That's the position that I hold. But I am well positioned to see not only the contractor service center, but then also the rest of the distribution network, as I have contacts to vendors, wholesalers, other distributors and retailers. I know truck drivers, loggers, mill operators. There's no position in which of this market that I can't see. And everything that I am telling you right now is showing me signs that we are going to find a very precarious spot if there is any pickup in demand. Now, where will we get that pickup in demand, that increase in which that people would want to buy lumber that would then create the increase in prices due to the fact that we are sitting in shortages now? What would create that moment? Interest rate adjustments. This is what everybody is looking for. In fact, you wouldn't even have to have interest rate adjustments. You just have to have enough of a belief that they are going to take place, and you would find that that would start to stimulate the economy. You would find that people would want to take advantage of the lowering of interest rates, and they would take on the idea that maybe the possibility there could be a way that they could refinance into the future. And the more that they are convinced of that outcome, the more likely they will start behaving in that way. Remember, the Fed doesn't have to do anything. All they have to do is put out enough of a credible threat, and the people will start to act. We are witnessing that take place. Now, if this credible threat, or even the actual change of, or actual adjustment down of rates, if this was to really take place, enough of a credible threat or the actual changing of interest rates, you would find that the builders who have been itching to fire off some projects, right? This is what they want to do. They want to build, but they don't want to build into an economy that is not going to be there to buy the house. If they are concerned about the buyer's traffic, then they are going to be concerned about starting homes, and we are witnessing that now. Home starts are definitely further down than they have been over the last couple of years. Now, are they as far down as they were back in 2015-16? No, of course not. They're much higher than they were back then. But the dramatic drop in the amount of starts that has taken place is being witnessed right now within the lumber industry. And these mills shutting down and curtailing development, like this is like indefinite shutdowns. Like they have no idea when they are going to fire these things back up. And when they do, they don't fire right back up. Logging, distribution, operations, drying, like there is distribution, there is so much that is involved within this. Like you think about it, if you want to bring logs to the mill, you have to not only have the trees cut down, hauled off the hill, brought and staged, milled, staged again, and then delivered out there into the industry. And every single one of these things is very bulky and heavy and difficult and hard to do. And it costs a lot of energy and time and manpower. And so just firing this thing back up or curtailing development is a very serious matter when it comes to these mills, because operation is something that needs to happen in a continuous fashion. But if you shut it down, it's difficult to fire it back up. And so when we see this happening, we know that if there is any time in which that the demand does pick up, if those interest rates come down, or the belief of enough of a belief that the interest rates come down starts to fire off the demand within the building industry, those builders increase the starts. Well, you're going to find that there's not enough lumber to meet the demand out there, because we're already seeing the issues of depletion taking place now. This is a perfect example of the bullwhip effect. Like, a lot of people are going to start hearing a lot more about the bullwhip effect as it starts to ripple through the economy in many industries out there. Lumber is a great one to follow. I have been following lumber for many years, and that's what really made this channel really popular, is all the lumber insight that I was giving from the boots on the ground perspective that I had. And it is so apparent, it's so obvious to me. But a lot of people, even on this channel, in the comment section, you're going to find now it's manipulated, it's greed, it's all kinds of stuff. Like, you're going to find all those statements. In fact, you're probably finding it happening right now. I'm telling you, it can't be that if I was able to predict it before it happened. Like, if I was before you saw the lumber prices come down and all that, I said, okay, the lumber prices are coming down. If the prices go down to 500 per thousand, you're going to find that mills are going to go into curtailment. They're going to tighten up the inventory. The prices are going to go up. They are not going to be able to meet the demand from their production because of how much they have reduced it. Prices are going to get elevated, and then people are going to say this is greed and manipulation. It's not. It's just you have to understand what has taken place within the industry itself. Oversupply, undersupply, oversupply, undersupply, until they finally find the equilibrium. And again, like, you can blame it on greed and manipulation. And I mean, I guess there was some probably manipulation tactics when it was happening with the shutdowns, when they locked the mills down originally back during the pandemic. But really, if you had been following my channel before that, you would have known that there was huge inventory depletions taking place prior to the pandemic. Right? We were reporting on British Columbia, and like all the mills up in British Columbia were shutting down like mad. I mean, I was reading articles, and I keep bringing this place up because of how sad the stories were, but there was a place up there called 100 Mile. who that's it. That's all they had was forest industry. They had trucks, they had logs, they had mills, and they had the little bit of infrastructure that supported that industry, and that's it. That's all they had. And so when they shut down the forest industry up there, when they shut down the logging operations, they had nothing else. That was it. And so 100, like if you read this, and that's literally what the place was called, 100 Mile, right? And I'm reading these stories about these poor families up there. This is like generations of people, 3-4 generations of people who have been up there working this industry, and all of a sudden it's over. Like closing up shop, man. There's no more. Logs are too far, they're too expensive, they're not getting the price for it, whatever it was. They started shutting these things down, and hearing those stories was like, it was sad. It was very sad. But then understanding what was taking place at the time didn't have anything to do with greed or manipulation. It came from a fact that a forest industry had been devastated not only from environmental impacts, but also mismanagement. So I guess if you want to say the mismanagement was greed and manipulation, yeah, okay. But really the environmental devastation that came from beetle infestation that killed off a lot of the trees up there, that wasn't something that was planned, right? I mean, that was something that they had to deal with, and it went on for like a decade. The results of that 10-decade-long infestation resulted in a salvage mode by the government to try and take advantage of the fact that all these trees had been killed off by this beetle, and that they could at least do something with them other than just letting them rot and just rot. So they cut the trees, went into salvage mode, made up a bunch of lumber, and shipped that stuff down into the United States. Well, when that salvage mode came to an end, it devastated those mills up there, right? Because ultimately the salvage mode had taken the log prices and dropped them down. The Canadian government does something a little different. They have what they call stumpage fees. And so in order for the logger to cut the tree down, they pay the government a certain stumpage fee, is what they refer to it as. And that's essentially an input cost going into the mill. So in order to go into salvage mode, they took that stumpage fee and they dropped it dramatically. Well, when they dropped that increased the amount of logs going into the mill, which was coming in at a cheaper input price for the mill. The mill was producing, this is all the British Columbia mills, they're producing an insane amount of lumber. They're shipping it down to the United States, and the price of lumber is going up dramatically high. This was back in like 2017, going into 2018. Right, so lumber runs up to $650 per thousand back then. The mills are up there, are pumping out a lot of lumber. They're loving it, and then all of a sudden, salvage mode comes to an end. Now, the way that they figure stumpage fee is off the current pricing that they have, right? So now here these mills are pumping out lumber at $650 per thousand. The Canadian government says, okay, we're going to put a stumpage fee, and according to the price that you're getting there at $650 per thousand. So all of a sudden the stumpage fee jumps up dramatically high, because $650 per thousand at the time was the new all-time high. So all of a sudden, the stumpage fee has just jumped up dramatically, and the input costs going into these Canadian mills just went up extensively, right? Because salvage mode had come to an end, stumpage fees ramps back up in accordance to the new higher inflated per thousand price that the mills were getting, right? So all of a sudden, they have this input cost that is quite extreme, and the price falls. So now they're not getting as much for the lumber, but yet they're paying more for the logs due to the higher input costs due to the stumpage fees that was based off of the $650 per thousand. That moment right there, mills were done. They were cooked, and it was out of business for them. And this is really what we had experienced all throughout 2019. That created the shortages, the major shortages within the lumber industry. Lockdowns took place, mills were shut down, even more shortages after the stimulus packages were handed out, and everybody ran down to the lumber yard and bought up all the lumber. It zapped the inventory. There was already a huge depletion of inventory all throughout 2019. Then there was even more depletion of inventory with the lockdowns, and then the inventory was zapped away with the stimulus packages. What happens to price? Boom. It shot up to an incredibly high price. But we have to understand why. It's because there was inelastic demand. This is important to remember. Inelastic demand means they had no choice. They had to purchase it. You and I, building a woodshed in the back, or even the garage, or possibly like an addition to the house, this could be considered inelastic demand. Or, I mean, sorry, elastic demand. Because we can make a choice that says, hey, man, we're going to back off on the project. We're not going to do it this year, right? Now, however, if the contract is signed by a contractor who says, hey, I plan on doing the remodel, I plan on doing the addition, I plan on doing this garage, and we're going to have it done by a certain amount of date, here's the contract for it. Once you go forward with that contract, that becomes inelastic demand, right? So the thought of doing it is elastic, but the contract is signed and now the project is in motion. That's inelastic demand. They go to buy the lumber for the garage and they can't find it anywhere. They will pay any price for it. And that's what drove the prices up. If it's not available out there and you have a contract to build and you have no other choice but to demand the lumber at any price in order to get it, then you will see prices go through the roof. And that's exactly what we had experienced when lumber ran up to $1,700 per thousand. Again, I have to think about what we are experiencing right now. Is it to the dramatic levels that we were experiencing back in 2019? I don't think so. Not yet. But if this continues, right, and things never stay the same, but if this continues where we have more mill curtailments, which they have announced, more mill shutdowns, which are very likely going into the future if the lumber futures stay close to the 500 per thousand, which we are experiencing, and if we don't see necessarily the people or the market's belief that there is going to be rate cuts or the credible threat is not prevailing enough, then we may not see the demand for lumber go up like we once had anticipated if there was that dropping of interest rates. Did I get all that right? So ultimately, we are looking for a demand for lumber in order to drive prices up. The only way we're going to see that demand for lumber is for the builders themselves to be encouraged to go out there and do new starts. Getting them to do new starts means that the buyer traffic has to be there. And in order for buyer traffic to be there, the interest rates would have to be down. Now, we are watching mortgage rates come down over the last couple of weeks due to the credible threat that came from the Federal Reserve, although I don't necessarily think that was a real credible threat. I think people anticipating the rate cuts are a little bit misguided and, I don't know how to say it, misinterpreted in a lot of ways. So I don't believe the Federal Reserve has committed themselves to any kind of rate cut going into the future. And if there is a rate cut going into the future, the market's perception of how that is going to impact their decisions is going to be very profound for the buyer's traffic and eventually going into the builder's demand. Did I say all that right? I know I said that kind of fast. I hope I got that right. I don't know, kind of twisted it around some. All right, I have about 10 more minutes here, and then I'm going to call it quits. We're going to do this as a very short live stream. I'm just going to answer a couple of questions, and what do we have here? Thank you, everybody, for being here, too. I really appreciate it. 326 viewers right now with 83 likes. Please go hit that like button. It'll get, well, I'm only going to be here for another 10 minutes, but we might be able to get a few more people to join in and ask a few good questions. Let's get down here. Well, I'm not answering Luther. Luther has to pay for me to read his comments. Okay. Dixter, profit margins go up when they lay people off. It's a trick. Yeah, and that's really what I think is happening with the builder stock right now. I mean, I couldn't quite understand why it was that they were doing so well on their stock, considering that their sentiment is so low. But then it also makes sense that the product that they are producing is still an incredibly high price. A lot of people say oh, house prices are coming down. Yeah, they are, but not like, maybe in some areas. My area, they have not fallen dramatically. They're still selling at an incredibly high price. And so when you think about the builders who are very nervous about the future, if they are laying people off, their input cost, right, comes down because they don't have the employee costs anymore. And the product that they do have on hand is selling for a high price. So it does make sense that their stock value would then move up. But that can't last forever, right? I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. How long could that last? I mean, that's somebody, I guess that would be somebody else who knows more about trading than me. All right. Have you looked over the FOMC minutes? I have not looked over the FOMC minutes as of just recently. No, I've been actually kind of busy over the weekend. That's one of the reasons why you saw so many short videos come out and all that. I was actually up visiting my sister up at Whidbey Island over the weekend and stuff. So I haven't had a whole lot of chance to actually read through anything. But while I was up there, I decided that I would cut some, all right, that I would cut some shorts for you. Okay, is the unemployment a factor for the Fed rate and how? Yes, it is. Absolutely. The Fed is mandated to do two things. Low inflation with stable prices. Make sure I say that right. Low inflation with stable prices and full employment. So when you have unemployment, and it's very difficult because they don't have an exact number, right? It's like employment at this exact rate. What they say is a running at its low inflation and stable prices with full employment and an economy running at its potential. So it's kind of difficult to understand what the employment level would have to be in order to trigger the Federal Reserve and what it is that they would be doing with interest rates and try to stimulate the economy. Because this is something that I found very interesting, is that the interest rate adjustments don't work like they used to. Now, I know most people are probably going to shake their head and roll their eyes, but we have been covering this information for quite some time. Mainly, it's the fact that there is a low neutral interest rate. That is the interest rate that neither stimulates nor restricts the economy. That neutral interest rate is really low, like close to zero. So if they were to try and stimulate the economy, they would have to take interest rates all the way to zero and then hope that the neutral interest rate had risen enough that they could drop far enough below it before hitting the lower bound that they could actually have some room to stimulate the economy. And I don't think that's necessarily in their toolbox right now. Okay, so the neutral interest rate is still incredibly low, which means that they are going to have to use their words. Their words is the only thing that can really stimulate the economy. And expectations of the future is really what their words is doing, is they are creating the expectation for the market to then go and behave in a way that can move into that expectation. Like, ultimately, it's forward guidance signaling job owning that is going to stimulate the economy. Now, the Federal Reserve, when it comes to their employment, the only way that you can really get employment to, like if you have high unemployment, to get more jobs out there, is to lower interest rates to spark business investment. And by sparking business investment, what you will do is you will get these businesses to then go out there and build buildings, buy equipment, hire people. And this is really where the lowering of interest rates then finds itself into the employment sector, right? So lowering interest rates sparks the business investment eventually hires the employees. So now if you're sitting in a situation in which that you have inflation that is running persistently high, right? This is a problem for the Federal Reserve when it comes to dealing with the dual mandate. So if they have high inflation, what they would typically want to do is lower the amount of employment out there, or in another way, raise the unemployment. But ultimately, they want less people working out there, because more people working is more people earning money, and then that money that they have earned is now creating the demand, and the demand creating the supply-demand imbalances, right? So once you have more people working, more people spending money, that increases the demand, and then you have prices move up. So again, if the Federal Reserve is trying to deal with an inflationary scenario, then they want the unemployment to rise to bring the inflation down. So which one is it that they're trying to deal with? Are they trying to deal with the high inflation, the persistently high inflation, the one that is still above their 2% target, which isn't really a target? We know this from the videos that we have done. But regardless, they still have an elevated inflation, and they are trying to bring this inflation down, so they say. So in order to bring the inflation down, they need elevated unemployment, or at least less job creation, less people working, less people spending money. Less people spending money brings the inflation down. So this is really what they are trying to do, right? Is to try and bring the inflationary scenario down, or are they trying to save the jobs? Well, we look at the unemployment that is, over a historic graph of unemployment, and you're going to find that where we are right now is not really that historically high, right? I mean, there has been times where unemployment was much higher than it is now. And really, since we have just grown accustomed to being dramatically low unemployment over the course of these last few years, we really don't understand what it's like to have a elevated unemployment. And this isn't even elevated, just people think it is because they just haven't experienced elevated unemployment for so long now. So again, this is very normal position for the Federal Reserve. I don't see where it is that they are failing. Like, they are achieving everything it is that they need to do in accordance to their dual mandate and what it is that they are doing with interest rates to try and keep the financial market from freezing up. Like, all that stuff seems to be going according to plan. Now, whether or not we're appreciative of it, or if we think that it's the correct or appropriate position in accordance to what we believe, that's a whole different story. But they had said we need full employment, low inflation with stable prices. We need, these certain conditions to be existing within the economy in order for us to, operate our monetary policy. And all those things are occurring right now, right? Everybody says that they have screwed up and they need to fix things. Like, they don't need to fix it, right? Not according to what they were wanting. This is what they wanted. If it didn't do this, then they would need to fix it. But this is what they were looking for. Even the inflation itself being moderately above 2% is something that they were looking for. Monetary policy, appropriate monetary policy, according to the Federal Reserve's own statements, talking about, the review of their monetary policy back in August of 2020, that they said it back then that appropriate monetary policy would seek to achieve an inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. They gave no mathematical formula for figuring that out. So when I look at what the Federal Reserve is attempting to do right now, they are landing very much within the plans that they had been communicating over the last 10, 20 years. And even, over the last 5 years. Speeches like this, Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World, describes things that we are experiencing right now. Right? So again, look for the Federal Reserve, and not even necessarily the movement of interest rates. Right? Think about it. Bad news will be good. Bad news will be good. If bad news hits the market enough, like all this million jobs that are, revised million jobs down or something, that bad news will then push the markets into the belief that the Fed will have no other choice but to lower interest rates. They will think they are forced to do this, and by that believing that they are forced to do it, they will start to behave in a way that actually reduces the interest rates themselves. Bad news is good for the economy. It forces it forces the market into a belief that the Federal Reserve will be lowering interest rates, and that action will actually lower interest rates regardless of what the Federal Reserve does. You'll see it happen. You'll see it happen. Right? Okay, guys, I'm getting close here. I'm going to have to call it quits. But let's go check out the Super Chat real quick. And where is it? Super Chat. Lumberjack Landlord, thank you so much for the $5, man. It's great to see you here. You see the new report in New York Times that showed jobs down 818,000 in 12-month period in the Labor Department newly revised numbers? Dion sent that to me. Yeah, I did see that. Now, again, I try to think of what this number really how this really impacts the economy. What is this really going to do for the Federal Reserve in their position? Now, I do wonder if this number is more of a hyped up concept to adjust the beliefs of what it is that the market is going to think about the Federal Reserve. This seems like a huge number, right? It seems like such a big number that it's like they will have no other choice, right? But really, what's the unemployment at right now, right? What is the inflation at right now? Is this part of their dual mandate? The part of the dual mandate, is that part outside of their little window of what it is that they want? Right? Because there's all kinds of other crazy shit that's happening out there, but they're only mandated to do two things, right? Low inflation, stable prices, and full employment. So even though we see these numbers coming out, if we don't see necessarily that unemployment dramatically rising, then we may not see the Federal Reserve needing to take action on account of it. Did I get that right? All right. It was awesome hanging out with you guys. Thank you so much, Lumberjack Landlord, for the $5 super chat. You're always so supportive of the channel and everything that I've been doing here, man. I mean, I really do appreciate it. And anybody who is looking to get into the real estate game, to understand what it is to have rental properties, I cannot encourage them enough to follow the Lumberjack Landlord. The guy is incredibly knowledgeable. He's just like us. Like, I've met him personally quite a few times on, you know, here on the internet, but then met him personally in Vegas. Super chill dude, awesome to get along with. And, you know, as far as understanding the game as the rental, real estate, finance game, I don't know if there's anybody else out there that you could relate to as much as you can the Lumberjack Landlord and his crew. You know, Dion and Mike Zuber and Millennial Mike and all those guys. They're super awesome people. All right, I think I'm going to leave it at that. Very much appreciate everybody being here. We got 362 viewers with 130 likes. Go hit that like button one last time before we end the chat. And, all right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.